Welcome back, guys. This video is part 3 of the full stack development 0 to Hero bootcamp, and in it we're going to cover the JavaScript language, which is another core language when making websites, along with HTML and CSS, which we've already covered part 1 and part 2 of this course. Now, JavaScript is used for interactions with the web page. HTML was to structure the web page, CSS was to style that web page, and now JavaScript is to interact with that web page. For example, when you click on a button on a web page and you want an action to happen, this is where JavaScript comes in. So we actually have a lot to unpack here, so we're going to get right into it. As you can see here, I've got a folder with 2 files in it, index.html and index.js. So if you could go ahead and create these 2 files, and we're going to start off by linking the index.js file into our HTML file. So if you go inside the body tag, then we create a script tag, and this is basically where all the JS or JavaScript is written. So if we just do a console.log hello world and save this and run it on the browser, and just open up a console, right click, inspect, and then go to the console, you should see hello world. And that's basically what console.log does, is that it logs something to the console. So you'll be using this quite a lot when you're debugging the code, or when you're looking for issues in the code, or you'd like to output something to the screen. You can use console.log. The second method of adding JavaScript to your HTML would be to link a file. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another script tag, but this time we're going to give it a attribute of source, and that will take the path for the file that you'd like to link. So we're adding index.js, which we've previously created, and we're going to comment this out. Actually, we're going to delete it because we're going to use this file. And inside this file, we're going to do another console.log and hello world, just to see that this file is being pulled into the HTML and actually outputting. So if you try and refresh, you're still seeing hello world. That means the file is being pulled and everything is working as expected. So now we can jump right in. The first thing I'd like to cover is outputting to the screen. So if you wanted to output something to the screen, let me use a shorter form for comments. Output to screen. There's a few ways that you can do this. One of them would be console.log that we've already covered, to output something to the console. And you also have document.write. We will put hello world again, and this will basically find this document right here. If you go to elements, this document right here, the whole HTML file, and it's gonna write within it hello world. So if we just view this in the browser, you'll see that it's outputted hello world. Inside the body tag, it's written hello world right here. So that's the second way. The other way is document.body. So we're selecting the document, which is a variable within JavaScript, to select the HTML, and inside of that we're selecting the body, which exists in the HTML right here. So now we have access to the body, and inside the body we do an inner HTML, which is a way to write some text, and we're going to give it hello world again. And this will basically do the same thing that this did, but we're going to comment this out and test this one. Refresh, you'll see hello world again. So inner HTML is a method that you can use to type in or write any text into the HTML. And lastly, we have alert. I'm going to do hello world again, and this will have the effect of showing a pop-up. As you can see, this page says hello world. And these are the 4 different ways that you can output something to the screen on a web browser. And the most common one that you'll be using when you're coding or developing is console.log, and also in a HTML. So that is the output to screen. The next part is the variables. So we'll add the variables here. I'm gonna write it as capitals. So when it comes to variables, variables are basically a way to store some data in the program. So any variable that exists within a program usually holds a specific data. So for example, we have this program called index.js. Within this program, we have a variable called C, and this C is assigned to a value called 10. So anytime you use C, you're really using the value 10. So what we've done here is we've just stored some data into this variable. So this is the variable name, or as they call it, the identifier, and then you have the value. So you can only have one of these identifiers. You can't reuse the same name unless you're updating the value. So for example, if I do C equals to 10 and I console.log this, I will see that C is equal to 10. If I console.log C, you'll see the value is 10. If I update C to 20, what do you think you'll see now that we've console.log C again? You will see that the value is updated to 20. So that's basically what you're doing here. You're creating an identifier, a variable, with the name C, and you're giving it the value, assigning it the value 10. And then later on in the program, you're updating the C to equal to 20. So this is the value and this is the identifier. And the identifier is case sensitive. So C, the C that we have right here that is equal to 10 is going to be different to the C, the capital C that is equal to 20. So if I just console.log these two together, I'll do a comma between them and do C, small c and a capital C, and you'll see 10 and 20. So these two are different to each other, although they're both C. One is a capital and one is a lowercase, and that just shows you that identifiers are case sensitive. And you can also have identifiers that use underscore or start with underscore, but you can't use a hyphen in your identifier. So if I wanted to do, for example, a variable called first name, I could do first name like this, or let's just give it a name, John. If we try to do first underscore name, again, Jonathan. And if we try to do first name equals to John 2 or Joanna, there we go. As you can see, these two seem to be fine, but this one is giving us an error. And the reason for that is because you have a hyphen here and you can't have an identifier with hyphen. So these are just some JavaScript rules to keep in mind. So if we try to console.log first name and also first underscore name, and we just comment this one out and check this, you'll see that we have John and Jonathan. So now this variable is holding this data, and this variable first underscore name is holding this data. And anytime you want to use these values, you can just refer to these variables or use these variables in your code. Okay. Now with variables, there is one more thing that needs to be mentioned, and that is when creating a variable, you usually need to give it something along the lines of let or const or var. Now previously in JavaScript, it was only var, where this just basically stands for variable, and then you'd give it the name of the variable, first name, and then you'd give it the value. So instead of first name, let's do last name, and then give it $. So this is how you would usually define a variable. And let's just console.log and view it in the browser. And as you can see, it's got $. Right there. So again, you could do it without, but usually when you're creating a variable or defining a variable, you would use one of these, either a var or you would use a let, which is for a variable that you know the value is going to change for down the line. So if you know that the variable is going to change, you can use let. And let's just try this as an example. We do x equals to 6 and we'll console.log x. You'll see we have 6 right there. If we try to do the third type, which is const, which stands for constant, and this will basically be used when you have a variable that will never change. So if you have a variable that is a constant and it remains the same value, then you will use that instead of let and var. So we have a constant of, let's say, age. My age is 22 and it's not going to be changing when this program is running, at least. So we check the age. Let's just console.log it first. And as you can see, again, it's the same thing, 22. And one of the differences between using a var and a let is that var can be redefined multiple times. So I could go down here and do var last name again and then update it to John Doe, for example. But if I had already set let x equal to 6, if I've already set x equal to 6 using let, then I wouldn't be able to redefine it using let equal to 5, for example, because I've already done that here. Whereas for var, it's fine to redefine it using var. That's one of the examples or the differences between the two. Now, one thing else you can do as well, I'm just going to remove all of these. One thing else that you can do is that you can create a variable that is undefined. So for example, we have a variable called name, but we don't know the value of name yet. Maybe we're going to get it from the user as an input, or we're pulling that data from the internet, from a certain API, a certain backend. What we would do is just type in either let or var and then the variable name, and we'll just leave it as that. And if you just try to console.log name right now, you'll see that the value is undefined. So what we've done here is we've declared a empty variable which sets it to undefined. Then later down the program, we could do name equals to John. And then if I just console.log this, you'll see that previously it was undefined, and then once we've set the value, now it is John. And one more thing that we can do with this, actually, just to show you right here, as I was saying before, I've already defined name here. I can't redefine it and put let name. That wouldn't work. It will tell you identifier name has already been declared. But if that was var, that would be just fine. So that would still work. Just to keep that in mind. Now, you've seen me here defining different strings or text, and I've put them in quotes, and you might be wondering why I've done that. With JavaScript, you have different types or data types. One of them is the number data type that we've covered here. And that is as simple as just typing in, I'm going to remove all of this and do let x equal to 6. Okay, and if I console.log x, you'll see that this is a number 6. Now, there's a type of accessory that you can use to find out the type of variable. So if I do type of space x, that will show you the type of the variable. So this is a number variable. If we go down here and do let y equals to quotes 6, which is what they call a string, and up here this is a number. Now if I do a console.log y and also type of y, you'll see that we have a 6, but this time it's a string and not a number. And this is the difference between a string and a number. String is usually for text, and numbers are obviously numbers, integers. And usually for a string you would have actual text like hello world, and let's just view that. Hello world, that's fine. So these are strings. You can have double quotes or single quotes, either work just fine, but we tend to use double quotes. And there's another data type called boolean or boolean. So let's say we have a user and we want to check if they're logged in or not. We'll do is logged in, and this boolean will either be a true or false. So it's a data type that can be set to either true or false. So we'll set it to false. We do console.log, and let's check is logged in, and as you can see at the bottom here we have false. And if we check the type of variable, you'll see that it's a boolean. So right now we have 3 different types that we've covered. There's also the array type. So let's check this out. We have an array is basically a list of items or a list of data. So we have a list of, say, cars, and the way you would define the array would be with open and closing brackets. And if we try to console.log cars, you'll see that it's set to just an empty bracket right here. If I try to add data into this cars array, which can take in any sets of data, it can take in numbers, strings, it could take in boolean, it can even take arrays. So you can add arrays within arrays, but to simplify it, we'll have different types of cars. We've got BMW, we've got I'm not very good with cars, but Toyota, Aston, what else do we have? Mazda. That should be enough. We've got 4 different cars, or 4 different types of cars within the array. As you can see, the first one has an index of 0. Second one is an index of 1, 2, 3. So with arrays, you usually start with an index of 0 and it goes up. So just keep that in mind, because it would make more sense for it to start with 1, but usually with programming languages, when it comes to lists or indexes, they usually start counting from 0. So if we go to Mazda would be at index number 3. Now if you wanted to access, or before that, let me just show you the type of cards so that you can see that this is a array. Now array is actually an object type, and we will cover object next, but just remember that this is an array, and arrays are actually objects in JavaScript, but you would call this an array. So if you see anyone referring to this, they would usually refer to it as an array and not an object. Now if you wanted to select, let's say we've got 4 different items here. If you wanted to select Toyota, for example, you would just put a open and closing bracket, and then you would add the number of it, the index number. So here we have Toyota in index number 1. If we check this, you'll see that we get Toyota. If we want Mazda, we'll have to go to the last index, which is 0, 1, 2, 3. So we go to 3. If you want the first index, we could do 0, and we get this, and I think you get the idea. Another way to get the last index could be, we can use a method called length, which basically calculates the length of the array. So this array is 1, 2, 3, 4 items long, so the length would be 4. So basically what we're doing here is we're entering the index, or we're calculating the index using this. So we would get 4. But if we look at this, we have index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, and we're actually writing index 4 here. So we wouldn't actually get any value. So what we do is just go -1, and that will always give us the last value. So if we just check this, you'll see Mazda is the last value. If I added a new type of car, which I can't think of at the minute, but let's say it's Mercedes, you will get Mercedes right here, because it's always checking the length and minusing 1 from it. So the length here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It puts in 5, and then 5 minus 1, it gives us 4. So this is 0 index. This is index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, index 4. And just to show you what I mean, right here, you can see the indexes, right? If you open this up, you'll see the indexes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what we've done is just pulled 4 and picked it out right here. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense. If it doesn't, don't worry. All you need to understand from this part is that the list in JavaScript is called arrays, and the way you would define an array is using brackets, and within it you can have different values of strings and numbers. We didn't add any numbers here, but let's just add a couple to show you what that looks like. And then we will do a console.log cars, and as you can see, we've got strings, we've got numbers. You can also add boolean inside of there, true, false. Check it out, there you go, and that's fine. So again, we've done numbers, we've done strings, and we've done arrays, and these are 3 different types of data types. Let me just comment this out. There we go. What else do we have? We have objects. Now an object is, let's just name this one OBG, short for object. Object is defined with curly brackets, so we have an opening and closing curly bracket, and what object does, it basically holds some data in the form of key and value pairs. So you have a key, for example, let's just rename this to person so that we can make more sense of it. And the person will usually have a name, so this will be the key name, and then we'll add a colon, and then the value will be, let's say, John, and then we do a comma. So this is the key and value pair that we've just spoken about. Then we add another key value pair. We'll have age. That'll be the 12 is a bit too young. Let's do 18. And then we have another key value pair of, say, occupation, and that will be unemployed. And then that's name, age, occupation. What else do we have? Say drives, and then false. Or maybe we should change it to has driving license. Probably spelled that wrong, did I? License? I'm not too sure. Well, let's just keep it that way. Now this is a object that we've created, and we've named it person. So anytime we want to access this object, we can do console.log person, and that should show us the complete object. And if we expand it, you'll see we have key age, and the value is 18. We have a key of value, or a key named has driving license, and the value is false. A key that has a name of name, and the value is John. Occupation, unemployed. So the left side is keys, and the right side is values, and these are called key value pairs. And that's basically what makes up a object. An object is made up of key value pairs. And if you wanted to access the person's name, for example, you can do person.name, and that should give you the name. If you wanted to get the age, you do .age. If you wanted to do, you get the idea. Now, if there's also another way where you can do open brackets, close brackets, and then inside of it you give it the name of the key. So we have age here. That should also give you the age. And if you do occupation, that will also give you the value. Now the difference is usually just as preference, really. In some cases you will need to use this, in other cases you can just use the dot, and I usually use just the dot unless I need to use the brackets, but both of them work. I'm just showing you both ways, and the point of this is that you understand what an object is. An object is a data type that is made up of key value pairs. That's all it is. So these are the main different data types. We've got a number, a string, an array, and an object. So make sure you just get familiar with these. Try to practice creating different variables using these different data types. Create a number, create a string, create a boolean. I've just missed out boolean. And create an array and an object. Very quickly, a number is just a number. A string is some text encompassed by quotes. And then boolean is either true or false. An array is a list that has different values within it. And an object is made up of key value pairs. Now, what we've been doing above here, where we do the name and then equals to value, these are called expressions. So your code is usually built up of different expressions or different statements, and a statement is made up of different expressions. So let me try to simplify it here, and let's do let x equal to 10 and let y equal to 5. I think it's telling me that we've already declared this above, so we can't redeclare it. So I'm going to comment these out because we don't need them anymore. There we go. So now we have x and y. X is equal to 10 and y is equal to 5. Let me just console.log that to demonstrate x, y, 10 and 5. Now what we want to do is create a new variable that will be the sum of x plus y. So the way to do that would be, again, just create a variable. Remember, this could be var or const or let, depending on your need. Right now we'll just set it as let, and then we'll give it a name of a equal to x plus y. Now this right here is called an expression, and that is basically just a combination of values or pairs, values or variables and operators like this that will compute a value. So right here, this is an operator that will compute this value x plus y. If we check what a equals to, if we just add it to the console.log right here, you'll see that 10 plus 15 or 10 plus 5 equals 15. That's x plus y equals to a. And this is, if you've done algebra in school, it's quite similar, where each letter holds a value and then working the different letters together to get certain values. So that's it really for expressions. And like I said, the code is usually just a bunch of statements and expressions that come together to bring your program to life. It's not very complicated once you get the hang of it, really. But you could try to play around with this, try to create different variables and see what you get with that. I'm going to move on to comments and how you can write comments in JavaScript. I think you've already seen me do that by just doing 2 slashes, and whatever you write here won't show up, and that's just a comment. The other way is that you can do a slash and then asterisk, asterisk again, and then slash. Just these two are sufficient, and then you can write any code you want within that, and that should be a comment. But we'll stick to 2 slashes because that's simpler. Comments are done by this, that's it. Now, we've briefly touched on operators up here, but we'll try to go a bit more in depth now. Operators are basically, for example, you've got the plus, the minus, the asterisk, the slash, the percentage sign, the plus plus, the minus minus, and the times times. So let's go through these operators one by one. The first one that we have is the plus sign, which is just for addition. We've done that up here, but we're going to repeat it just so that we can get in the habit of writing this. We're going to create, I'm going to actually comment this out so that we can reuse these values or variables. So we've got b equals to say 10 again, and then x equals to 30. Now we want to compute, say, variable c, which is going to equal b plus x. If we console.log this, what do you think you're going to see? Well, you'll see 10 plus 30, right, which is 40, and that is basically the plus sign. Now if we do, actually what we're going to do is we're going to create another c, which is basically updating the variable right here. So the value 40 is going to get updated to whatever this is equal to. So we're going to do c equals to x minus b, and that will basically give us the new value of c, and that will be 20. So what's happening here is that we're just subtracting 10 from 30. 30 minus 10 equals to 20. Next one is the asterisk. Asterisk is, let's do that again, and this time we'll do asterisk. Asterisk is basically times, so 10 times 30 will give us 300, and then we've got the divide, and now we will do 30 divided by 10. So to do that, we'll just copy paste and then do divide, which is the slash, and that will give us 3. So all we're doing here is we're setting the value. X has already been set up here to 30 and b to 10, and what we do is we take the value of x right here and b, and we're dividing them together, and we're getting the c, which is in this case 3. We also have the module. So for the module, we'll do a new one. We'll do let y equals to 15 and let p equals to say 5. We're gonna change this to 16 actually. So change y to 16 and p to 5, and then we'll do let's answer equals to, or we'll name this a module, equals to 16 percentage sign 5, and this will basically give us the remainder of this division. So if you were to divide 16 by 5, what would be the remainder that you would have? So if we try to console.log module, and you'll get 1. So it's 15 divided by 5 gives you 3. So that fits in perfectly. There's no remainders there. So if you do 15 divided by 5, you'll see the module is actually 0. This is actually called modulus, not module. But the idea of modulus is that it gives you the remainder of the division. So if you do 15 divided by 5, you get no remainder because it's a perfect division. If you do 16, 15 into 5 gives you 3, but 16 gives you a remainder of 1. If that makes sense. Again, 20 divided by 5 will give you 4. So the remainder is 0. But if you do 21 divided by 5, you'll get a remainder of 1, because 20 fits right into 5. It divides right into 5 perfectly, but 21 doesn't. And I think you get the idea with this. But that is basically the modulus. If you don't get the idea right here, don't worry. We're going to have plenty of examples in the future where we're going to use this modulus operator, and it will make plenty of sense then. But I'm sure right now it also made sense. If it did it, don't worry. Moving on to the plus plus, which is incrementing by 1. So to show you this, I'm gonna create a new variable called I'm running out of letters here, am I? Q equals to 5. Now we want to do Q plus plus. Before the Q plus plus, we will do console.log and see what Q is, and then a console.log after to see what Q is. I'm going to comment out the module console.log and just check this out. You see, first we defined it as 5, so when we check it out in the console, we'll see that the value is 5, and then plus plus will only add 1 to it. So the idea of plus plus is just to increment the value by 1, and then you see we have a 6 because of that. So Q plus plus is exactly the same as Q plus 1. There is no difference. It's just a different way of writing it. You also have Q minus minus, which is the same, but instead of adding 1, we were subtracting 1. So if we comment this out and if we save this and just have a look at it, you'll see that it started off as 5 and then we minused 1 and now it's 4. So the idea of minus, minus and plus, plus is incrementing and decrementing by 1. That's all it is. And then the last one is exponential. So let's say we have, let me comment this stuff out. Let's say we do let x equals to 2, and we have an x up here, so we're just going to comment this stuff out right now. Actually, I can comment everything out except the let x equals 2. So for this one, actually what we'll do is do x equals to 2 exponential 4. And this is basically saying 2 to the power of 4, I believe. So if we do console.log x, you should see 16. So 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 gives you 16. If we do 4 to the power of 2, you get the same thing. So that's basically what that does. And these are the basic operators that you'll be using: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, modulus, incrementing by 1, and decrementing by 1, and exponential. So I'd say try to practice with these as well. So try to create different variables and try to use different operators until you feel comfortable, and try to make sure that you keep console.logging things so that you see what's happening in the code. But we're going to move on to assignment operators, which is similar to what we've done, but it's just shorthand. For example, for things like, let's say we have an x equals to 10, right? And now we want to add 5 to that x. We want to update the value of the variable x from 10 to 15, or we want to add 5 to it. So one way to do it would be x equals to x plus 5, and that will surely update it to 15. But as you can see, we've written x too many times here. So what we can do is we can do x plus equals to 5, and these two are basically the same. This is like writing this, but it's just a shorthand for it. So just to show you that it is the same thing, I'm going to copy this and then paste it here, and then comment this out, and look at this, still get 15. So plus equals is the same as writing equals to x equals to x plus 5. Instead of having to write x twice, you're just writing this. And the same is true for the other operators. So I could do times equals 5, which is the same as saying x equals to x times 5. And here I'm actually going to write the comment x equals to x plus 5. Let's remove this. So I mean, when you first start, you can stick to using this, but if you read any code online and you see something like this, I just want you to understand that this is what it means, and I'm sure down the line you will also start using the shorthand, because it's a shorthand and it's there for a reason, just to simplify the amount of characters you have to write. So again, you can use this with division as well. You can do x slash equals to 5, which means x equals to x divided by 5, same thing. And you can also do x minus equals to 5, which is the same thing as x equals to x minus 5. So we're just eradicating the need of having to write x twice by using shorthand. And that is pretty much it, really. That is what they call assignment operators. Let's comment this out. Actually, we need that. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. We've covered quite a bit so far, and we're going to put it all into practice soon, but I'm just covering all the important parts and trying to explain the concepts as well as I can. and as quick as I can, because again we will put all of this into practice, and whilst you're practicing is when you're going to gain the most amount of knowledge. But it's good to know the different types of data that you have in JavaScript, like strings, numbers, etc. So that's why we're doing this. There is a different type of expression that you can have, which is called a condition. And a condition looks something like, let's say we have a value of, and again I'm going to comment all of this out because we don't need it. Let's say we have a value of, or a variable called x, and it equals to say 10, and we have another variable called y, and it equals to 10, but in strings, so in quotes. Now remember, this is a string and this is a number. So what we're going to try and do is we're going to have a look at saving it in another variable, or creating another variable called c, and here we're going to write a condition, and we're going to check if these two are equal to each other. The way to do that would be to do x double equal signs y. So this will check if x is equal to y, and then the result of that expression will be saved to this variable. So if it's true, the value will be true, and c will be basically holding the true value. If this results to false, then there will be false right here, and c will basically equal to false. So if we just console.log c, you should see true, because 10 is equal to 10. But this double equal sign checks for the value only. So it checks if the value of 10 is equal to the value of 10, which is true. But if you add a third equal sign, this checks for the value but also the type. So now if we're checking for the value 10 is equal to value 10, but the type here is number, type of number. Come on, man, why can't I type? And here they've got the type of string. So what 3 equal signs does is it checks for the value, which is true, but it also checks for the type, and here the type is not equal. You have a number and you have a string, so this should result to false. If we check, as you can see, it's false. But again, if you remove that and you only have 2 equal signs which checks only for the value, it will be true. Hopefully that's clear. If you want to check for, let's write a comment. 2 equal signs checks for value, and 3 equal signs checks for value and type. Alright, and this is an example of a condition where something will result in either true or false. And if you remember, true or false is a Boolean. So what we're doing here, we're setting C to a Boolean effectively. Alright, so that is everything about variables really, and expressions and assignment operators and operators. Now we're going to try to move on to functions. So I'm going to comment all of this out and move on to functions. Now functions are different to variables. Functions is basically a block of code that will achieve something that you're looking to achieve. So let's say, for example, I have a business, and part of that business is to take a certain item and deliver it to a certain address. Now a function that I would have within that business is to do the drop from my address to that address, and that will be a function. For example, I would have a delivery person who will go from point A to point B. That would be one of my functions, for example. Another function could be you have, for example, a car, and within that car you have different things that you can do. You can brake, you can accelerate, etc. So each one of these will be a different function. Using the horn could be a different function. The steering could be a different function. So every function is a separate block of code that will do a specific thing. So let's say, for example, and the way you would define this is you would write just function, and then you would write the name of the function. So let's say here we want to do a double. We want to write a function that will double any number we give it. So we write the name of the function and then parentheses, and inside these parentheses we'll add the argument. So for example, if you have a function like we said where you've got a person who's delivering the item from location A to location B, in order for them to do their job they need a vehicle or something that will help them go from point A to point B. So an argument could be, for example, in that case, a vehicle. I can never spell vehicle, but I think that's how you spell it. So that would be an argument. This is something that they need to complete the function, if that makes sense. So here, in this case, we have a double function where we're going to double the value that we get. So the argument here would be the value that we need to double. So let's just name it num. Again, this is the name of the function and this is the argument that we're giving it. The function needs this so that it can do its job. And then we'll do a open and close curly bracket, hit enter, and everything in this space right here is going to be the code that is going to run this function. So again, we've got function right here, and then the name of the function, and then the stuff that we need to get the function working. And here we'll have the actual operations that will happen within that function. Like for example, if we have that same example of a person going from point A to point B to drop an item, the first part would be to start the vehicle and then drive to destination, and then the third part will be deliver the item, for example. And if I just try to create a new function to try and explain that example, I would have a function called deliver item, and inside of this I'll have the vehicle and item. So my function can't work without giving the delivery guy the vehicle to use and the item they need to deliver. And inside of here they will basically do these three things. So this is what a function would look like, right? You'd give it a name that makes sense to you, and then you would give it the things they need to complete that operation. And within the brackets you write all the steps that that person or that thing has to do in order to complete the operation. So again, for this example, what they're going to do is they're going to need to start the vehicle, obviously. They're going to need to drive to the destination. They're going to need to get out the car and deliver the item to the person and then come back. Yeah. So all these items, all these steps need to be completed in order to complete the deliver item function. Now, this function usually returns an item or returns a value. So once the function does all its work, it will return something. It could be anything. It could be a string, it could be a number, it could be anything. So let's just say right here we have a double function where we want to double the value that we get. So inside the function we will have access to this number that we've passed in, and now we want to double this number. The way to double it will be just to times it by 2, right? So now what we're doing is we are returning the value of this. As you can see, again, we're running this function which will take in the number, and what it does, it basically doubles that number by timesing num by 2, and it returns that value. So now if we try to use this, we do console.log, and then we try to use it. Let's do double, and the way you would use it is just by using the name that we've given it. So this is define a function here, and then use a function here. So what we've done here is we've defined the function. We haven't used it yet, we've just defined it so that we can use it later on in the code. And now here we need to use it. So we're doing the name of the function, open parentheses, and then we give it the value that we want it to use or we want it to double. So let's do 20. And if this works correctly, we should see a value of 20 times 2, which will be 40. And as you can see, we get 40. So again, a function is just a set of code or a block of code that will run through certain steps and then give you a value as a return. And everything in the parentheses is called arguments. So you could access the arguments using the value that you've given it, or you can also do arguments and then 0. So if I do arguments and then bracket 0, that should give me the same value right here. Arguments is basically an array, which we've covered earlier. It's a list of different items. So if I gave it here num1 or num2, num3, num4, for example, you could go through each argument by doing 0, 1, 2, 3. Each one will be the next index. So this will be index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3 in the arguments. So that's why we've used 0 right here, because it's the first one and it's the only one. And this is how you would access it. But again, the easier way is just to use num. Use the same value that you've given it here. This could be anything. So I could have given it number, and I would have to use that same thing here. Anything I use here, I basically have to use here. So let's put it back to as it was, put it back to number or num, and that is one example of a function. We could try to do another example, but I don't think there's any point in that right now, because we will cover this extensively later on. What I will do is show you another way to write this function. So this is how it used to be written prior to 2016. I mean, you can still use that, but now they have something called arrow functions. Arrow functions, which is literally the same thing, but you would just have arrows while defining the functions. So you would do something like const, and then the name of the variable or the function, and then equals to parentheses. We'll give it num, like here, just like we did up here, and then the arrow comes right here, and then open close brackets, and then we copy paste the content into this. And this is literally the same as this. So if we comment this out and run the code, you should still see this working. There you go. So what it does is it calls the function double, or the variable double, which is a function that takes in one value, num, and it returns num times 2. So it returns a number. And they call this an arrow function, as you can see, because it has an arrow. And that is basically the difference between these two functions, really. You can write the function, or you can define the function using this method or that method, but I'm just showing you the two different examples because you will see a lot of code that uses the arrow functions. Most updated code uses this way of doing things. So I just wanted to expose you to both ways, and that is basically functions, really. So your code would usually consist of a bunch of functions working together, and that is basically it for this part. If we move on to let's say, I think something we haven't done is the events. So earlier on I mentioned that JavaScript is used to interact with the web page. Now so far we haven't tried to interact with the web page in any way, so we're going to do that right now. What we're going to do is go to the HTML file and add a button, and give that button an ID of, let's say, submit. And then we close that button off, save, go back to our our JavaScript. I'm gonna comment all of these out for now because you don't need it, and I'm sure you've taken note of it. Now what we want to do is we want to select this button, and we want to perform a certain action when that button is clicked, right? So there's multiple ways of doing this. One way is to add a event listener on the HTML called onClick, and then give it the function you want to run. So for example, we want it to run me, the function called run me, right? And then save that. Now we need to create that function called run me, and let's just say hello world. Now every time, well, the ice cream man is here. Every time you want the hello world or the run me function to run, you could just click on this button. As you can see, on click, it will run me. Let's test that out very quickly. And maybe we need to give the button some text. So inside the button tag, let's just put run me. Okay, there we go. Now we can see something. If we click on this, you should see hello world, hello world, hello world, hello world. So that's working fine. That's one way to run the JavaScript and allow it to interact with the HTML, is to use these attributes, these event attributes. The other way is to actually select this element from within JavaScript. So we don't need this. Within JavaScript, we will do document to select the HTML document, and then there's something called query selector, which will help us query the HTML document to find certain elements that we want. And here we can do, just as we would do with CSS, we would give it the hashtag, because in the HTML we used ID. If we use class, we would give it dot, but for ID we use hashtag, and then we would give it the name of the ID, which is submit. So go here, write and submit, and that should select the button tag. And just to show you, we could do console.log. Actually, I want you to get into the habit of saving things into variables. So let's do let button element equals to this right here. So what this will do is it will select the button with ID submit, and it will save it to this button element variable. So anytime you want to access the element, the button element, you can just go to button element, and we're just console.logging it to see that it works fine. And as you can see, we are selecting the button element right here, or the button with ID submit, and this is all the data that we have. So what we want to do is we want to do button element dot add event listener, and then give it quotes and hit click, or type in click, and then give it an arrow function. And this arrow function will take in the E, which is the event, and here we can just do console.log submit button was clicked. So again, what we've done here is we've selected the button element variable that is holding the button tag, and we've added a event listener which will listen for a click, and we separate this by a comma, give it an arrow function, and this is basically what will run. Anything inside these curly brackets is what will run when you click on the button. So every time we click on a button, we should see a console.log saying submit button was clicked. Let's check. Let's remove this console.log. You don't need that. Now let's click on the button. As you can see, submit button was clicked 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 times. Now we want to run the run me function from here. So we do run me and then parentheses, and this will call this function. So now instead of seeing that text, we should see hello world, hello world, hello world, hello world. And these are the two different ways that you can interact with elements in the HTML. You can write the attributes inside the HTML and just connect it to the function, or you can use something called add event listener and pick the event that you want to use. So you have different events as well, like mouse over, when you hover your mouse over, mouse in, mouse out, just different events that you can look up. If you want to do, let's say JS add events listener, let's see the different events that we have access to. I'm sure it will show you somewhere here. Let's have a look. So you've got click, you've got mouse over, mouse out, mouse move, every time the mouse moves, and there's a lot more that you can look at if you just scroll through these documents, I'm sure you'll find a lot more. Or we could just do JS events. There you go. You've got unchanged. These are the ones that you can add to the HTML. So we added this earlier on click. You've got unchanged, which is for like input fields. When you change the input field or add a text to the input field, this will run. Mouse over is when you put the mouse over something. Mouse out when the mouse moves out of something. Key down is when you press a key on the keyboard. And unload, each one has its explanation, but there you go. Unload is when the browser finishes loading the page. For the JS events, it doesn't seem to be listed, but if you look around, I'm sure you'll find it somewhere. But it's basically these that you've just looked at. So you would do something like click, mouse over, mouse out, key down, change, etc. without the on, if you want to use it right here. I'm going to put this back to click, and then we're gonna, actually maybe I'll just show you mouse over very quickly. So now every time I put the mouse over here, you should see this run. Yep, I think that's quite straightforward. I'm going to comment this out for now. Okay, so next up we're going to look at something called string methods. String methods. So these are methods that have been predefined within JavaScript for you to utilize. And I'm going to give you an example of, let's say we have a excuse me, we have a variable x with a value of hello world, and now we'll do a console.log and we'll use one of the string methods called length. So we could do x length, which we've already actually used up here somewhere when we're using the array. So you can do dot length on an array and also a string, and it will basically give you the length of that, in this case the string. So the length of the string, if you do console.log and check, you'll see this string has 11 characters. So let's check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So even the space is considered a character. So what this gives us is basically the length of this string, which is 11 characters. That is one method. Another method we can use is called .slice, which takes in .slice, and it takes in, as you can see right here, it takes in a start and an end number, and that basically tells it, as you can see, the description is the index to the beginning of the specified portion of string object. It returns a section of a string. So we tell it where we'd like it to start and where we'd like it to end, which character we'd like it to start, let's say 1, and where would we like it to end, let's say 10, actually maybe 5. And then if we wrap this in a console.log, we should see, so what we've done here is we've gone to the first character, so this would be number 1, and I believe start won't be included. So if we do 0, what happens? It starts at 0, so I guess this is 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And this is basically the index from 0 to 10, even though the length is 11 because it starts from 1, but the index always starts from 0, as we said. So what we're doing here is we're getting the index from 1, which is this, and we're finishing at 5. So 2, 3, 4, 5, which is this space. So if we do that, we actually don't include this space. It's just from 1 to 4 basically. And we also have console.log x dot sub str, and this takes in from and length. As you can see, it says deprecated, so this is not really recommended to use anymore. But what this does, it gets a substring beginning at the specified location and having the specified length. So it's similar to start and end, but this time it takes an index of where it starts and the length of how long it should go for. So if you put 4, it will go from 0 until 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I guess it will stop at L. Basically the length from index 0. So there you go, it stops at L. It goes on for 4 different characters starting from index 0. But this is not recommended. I believe the current one that's being used is x.substring, which takes in a start number and an end number. Returns the substring at specified location with a string object. Just similar to slice really. But if we check slice, let's see what it actually returns. Returns a section of a string. And this one returns, the substring returns, if we just check again, substring returns the substring at the specified location within us. So they both return strings, but one takes in the start and end, and the other one seems to take in the start and end as well. They're just 2 different ways of doing the same thing, I guess. Let's just check. We'll do 0, 4, 0, 4 for both of them. When we check, they both do the exact same thing. Except that here with slice, the start is optional and the end is optional. If you check here again, you'll see start is optional. This question mark is an optional parameter, and end is also optional. So if you give it nothing, it will just create a copy. It'll create a new copy of the string. As you can see, x.slice created a new copy up here. And with regards to substring, you see that start is required, and in end, the parameter end or the argument to end is optional. So I guess that's the difference between the two. One has 2 optional parameters, the other one only has 1 optional parameter. So here you can give it the first parameter and then it will fill in the last one. Moving on, we've got there's also other string methods that you can look up on W3 schools. So if I was to go to, for example, let's do a search for string methods JS, string methods, you'll see a bunch of them in here that you can go through, and we've covered pretty much most of them, but feel free to go through and check for more. We also have string search methods. So if you wanted to search for certain things within the string, you can do this, or you can use this. So let's say we have a value of, we actually have x defined here as hello world, so let's just use that. If we do console.log x.index of, what this does, as it says, it returns the position of the first occurrence of a substring. So let's say we were looking for D. It will check where D appears here, and it will return the index, and it will return it in the form of a number. So it will return the index of D in this string right here. So if we just console.log, and we're going to remove or we're going to comment out all these console.logs so that we can clean it up a bit. And as you can see, D appears in index 10. And one way to access a specific index within a string is also similar to the way you would access an index within an array. You just type in the variable name and then hit brackets, open and close brackets, and then the index. So here we have index 10. Let's put index 10 and see what we get. We get D, exactly what we have here. So if we check for W, you'll get index of 6. If you check for a space, you'll get index of 5. Okay, So if we do here 5, you should see a space right here. And that's it for index of. We also have last index of, which is similar to index of, but it's the last index, as the name suggests. Last index of, let's say we want the index of L, because we have 2 occurrences of L, but we want the last one. So it should be 0, 1, 2, and 3. If we check this, it says 9. Actually, L appears here. I didn't see that, my bad. We've got L in the word world, and that appears in 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that is correct. We've got something called starts with, and if we check what it does, returns true if the sequence of elements of search string converted to a string is the same as the corresponding elements of this object converted to a string, start in position, otherwise returns false. So that was quite a bit. Now let's see how this works. This basically takes in a search string, so let's search for world, and then we'll give it a position. Or shall we, that position seems to be optional, so let's leave that out for a second and see what we get. So it says we're getting false, so I'm guessing this means that it doesn't start with world, because the name of the method suggests that the value that you give it is supposed to start with that. So if we put, for example, hello, then it should be true, because the variable itself, or the value, starts with hello. So this method on just checks if the value you've given it is what comes at the start of the variable, or the start of the value. And as you can see, if we type in hello, it's true. If we type in anything other than hello, it's going to be false, because it doesn't start with that. So if we give it a H, will that work? As you can see, it still works. If we give it an E, it still works. LL still works, because it's trying to match at the very beginning of the string, and it's saying that the values match at the start, and that's why it's giving you true or false. Hopefully I've explained that well. If I haven't explained it well, I will try to use it in the next coming videos, and so you don't have to worry about that. But I think it's quite self-explanatory really with the name. Moving on, we've got a different way of expressing strings or defining strings. So far the way that we have covered is using double quotes or single quotes. The other way is you could use something called string literals, which is using the backticks, and within here you can add a single quote or double quote, which is something you can't do above here. If you tried to add a single quote within a double quote, it would work, but if you try to add a double quote, it will actually close the opening double quote, so that wouldn't work. And similarly here as well, you would be able to add a double quote in a single quote, but you can't add a single quote in a single quote string. So for that case, you would use a string literal, as they call it, which is the backticks, and within the backticks you can say, hello, my name is John, and I'm 16 years old, and we're going to do one more thing. We're going to create a new variable and name it age, actually, and we're going to give it 16. Now we want to use this age instead of this number here, so what we can do is use the $, curly brackets, open and close, and then add the age in here, and you'll see that this will actually allow you to put in variables within the string itself, which is not something you can do in the double or single quotes. So let's just console.log the queue, have a look at it. You'll see, hello, my name is John and I am 16 years old. Even though we didn't type 16 here, we just reference this variable using the $ in the curly brackets. So once again, the benefit of using the string literals is to be able to reference variables within them, and also use double quotes and single quotes. Moving on, we're actually covering quite a bit right now. We're almost halfway. Next we've got the number methods. So we'll put that as a comment these out because we don't need them no more, and also comment out the X. So we'll create a new variable called X equals to 5 because we're going to be dealing with numbers. And now we want to check the first method, which is x.toString, and as the name suggests, returns a string representation of an object. So it just returns a string of the X, which is 5 at the minute. So if we check this, you'll see you get 5. If we just add X here with a comma, you maybe add a type of here and a type of here, separated by a comma, you should see that the first one is a number and the second one is a string. So this X originally is a number, but when you do toString, it becomes a string, as you can see. That is one method that is very common. Another one would be toExponential. Returns a string containing a number represented in exponential notation. So let's just have a look at this. Console.log, and there you go, the exponential. Another one is console.log. Let's give X a bit more. Let's do 5.56, and I'm just going to check the type of X at the minute to see if it's a number or if it's a float. It's still a number. Okay, so now if you do console, I'm not sure why I deleted that, but console.log X to fixed, which returns a string representing a number in fixed point notation. So we can give it a number here. Let's do 2, and let's set this to actually 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now if you look at this, you'll see that it rounds it up to 2 decimal places. If I do 3, it'll be 3 decimal places, and so on. If I do 0, it rounds up to 1, to a single digit, and that's fine. I'm going to leave that at 2 and comment it out. Copy and paste. The next one is to precision, which if we just go back and check what it means, returns a string containing a number representation or represented either in exponential or fixed point notation with a specified number of digits. So let's say precision 2. Precision 3. This will give us basically that set amount of numbers. So if you put 3, you get 3 numbers back, and it will be rounded up. This will give us 4 numbers back, and so on. So these are the decimal places, and these are the precision places. We also have the number object that we can use here, the number method, and this takes in a string, and it converts it to a value. So if we give it a string of 4 and we check, you'll see that it converts the 4 to a number. And if you're not sure, you can do a type of space, and you can see that this is a number. We also have another method that does the exact same thing called parseInt, which takes in a value, usually a string, 900 for example, and it will change it into a number again. And you can check by doing type of number. If you try to give it an actual word, you'll see that it tells you NaN. NaN means not a number, so it wouldn't be able to pass it into a number because you haven't really given it a number like string. So we'll leave that commented out. We've got pass float, which will convert a string to a floating point number. So if you have a string like 12.989, for example, what this will do, it will pass it into a number. So basically passing strings with decimal values. If I do a type of, again, this is a number, and this basically just passes the float. Float means decimal places. If I try doing word again, what do we get? Again, we get not a number. So this has to be a number like string for it to work. I think that's clear. Moving on. Let's just put a comment here. NaN means not a number. There we go. So we've covered string methods, we've covered number methods, we're going to cover array methods now, and this is the more interesting part, I believe, just because what these methods can do is a lot more than the previous methods that we've covered. So we have a variable called ARR, which is so short for array, and within this array we have, let's say, array.push 10, and we console.log ARR, the array. You'll see that this array, although it was defined as an empty array with no values in it, we did a .push, which pushes a value into the array. So it basically adds number 10 here into the array. And so now we have a value of array with the index 0 equaling to 10. If I just go a step back and do this, it will show you that what push basically does is it appends new elements to the end of an array and returns the new length of the array. So what this does is whatever you give it here, it will append to the end of the array, and that's very important. So let's do string and check. You'll see that it adds string to the end. What it means by it returns the length of the array. If you do console.log around this thing, it will return, because this method will run and then it will return a value, right? This is an expression that is going to return a value, and that value is basically the length of the new array. So if you check this, you'll see that it's 1 now. If we add another one, the return of that value will be 2. So it's good to keep that in mind. But that's basically what push does. Pushes a new element or a new value pushes a new value to the end of, of the array, to the end of the array. Now we also have x dot, there's the opposite. So we have push that pushes it to the end of the array. We have shift, I believe, shift or unshift, unshift. What unshift does, it inserts new elements at the start of the array. So let's write that as a comment. Pushes a new value to the start of the array. So that's the difference between these two. One pushes it to the end, the other one pushes it to the start. Let's just check this now. We've created an empty array, we've pushed string to it. So now string is of index 0. Now we add another value, which is going to be a string, and we're going to call it string 2. And you will see that string 2 now will become the first element in the array. So this will be the element in index 0. So if we just console.log x and try to get the first element, which is 0, as you can expect, it will be this one, because unshift is going to push this right here to the start of the array. sorry, we need to change this to R instead of X. I'm not sure why I typed in X there, but clearly I'm starting to get tired. But let's move on, refresh, and as you can see, the first element is this, and let's just check the entire array instead. You see that string is the second one and string 2 is the first one. And if we try to add another value using push, let's say push 3, it will push it to the end, but if we use unshift, it will push it to the start. And that's basically the difference between these two. They both add elements to the array, one adds it to the end and the other one adds it to the start. Okay, very good. We also have sort, so dot sort, and as you can see, it tells you sorts an array in place. This method mutates the array and returns a reference to the same array. So it basically just sorts the array using a function, and we're going to create a new variable here called x equals to 10, 5, 6, 7, or 6, 7, 9, 1, 2, or yeah, 2. And I think we've defined x here, so we're going to comment it out. And here we'll use x.sort and then view x in a console.log. And we're going to put a console.log up here as well. So we're going to console.log this array that we've created with different numbers before the sort and after the sort. Now if we just have a look at this, you'll see that before the sort we had 10, 5, 3, 6, 7, 9, 1, 2. After the sort, what we've gotten is 1, 10, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 9. So what it's done is it's looked at the first number and it's tried to order it in that way. But what you can do, because you can see that this is not correct, 1 and then 10, 2 is smaller than 10, so that should come first, 3 is smaller than 10, 5, 6, 7, 9, all smaller than 10. 10 should be last effectively. So clearly that sort function is not working great out of the box. What you can do is give it a arrow function, for example, and inside this arrow function you do a return. This arrow function will give you two different values or two different arguments, a and b, and basically what it will do, it will loop through the array and it will give you each value one by one. So if we just do a console.log a, b to see what these values are, and then comment this console.log out, comment this console.log out, so I only have this console.log right here, and look at it, you'll see that the first time the loop runs, a is 5 and b is 10. The second time a is 3 and b is 5. The third time a is 6 and b is 3. The fourth time a is 7 and b is 6, etc. So this is basically a loop that loops through each item, and every time it loops through one item you'll get these values. Now what you can do is do return a bigger than b, and then just comment out this console.log, we don't need it anymore, and remove this, and let's view x at the bottom here. Now let's have a look at this. You'll see that nothing has happened actually. What we need to do is add this condition, a greater than b, and then add a question mark, and basically what we want to do is give it a value if it's true and give it a value if it's false. So 1 if it's true and -1 if it's not true. Let's have a look at this, and as you can see it has sorted this correctly now. If we change this from greater than to less than, it's gonna rearrange it the other way around. And this is a bit of a deeper concept, but I just tried to explain to you what .sort does. So we'll leave this out for now, but we will come back to it, so don't worry if it doesn't make much sense. But the main idea of this is to understand that .sort is a method that takes in a function by which you can sort an array in ascending or descending order, or if you have a different sort of condition, you can use that as well. Other than that, I'm gonna just very quickly show you the array methods that are available, because there's quite a lot, to be honest. We can't cover all of them because there is quite a lot of them. We could look at pop very quickly. So we have r.pop, which removes the last element from an array and returns it. If the array is empty, undefined is returned, and the array is not modified. So what this will do is basically, if you can see right here, we've got an empty array, and then we added string to it, and then we added string 2 to it. So we have two values in this array, two indexes. In pop, we'll remove the latest one or the last one, which in this case will be string. So if we look at console.log array or r, you'll see that the value is just string 2, because the string, this right here, has been removed because it's the last one. That's what pop does. Remove this, try again, you'll see string is right there, but pop removes the last string or the last value in the array. Okay. What do we have next? Well, we have dates. So in JavaScript, if you wanted to create a date, we actually have date objects that we can use. So you would do something like let date equals to new date parentheses, and that will give us a date or today's date. Let's just do console.log and have a look at that. As you can see, Friday, August 19th is 7:41 where I am, and that is basically how you can get today's date. We also have something called the math object, and this is actually quite interesting. So we're going to look at firstly doing math.round 4.3, for example. Let me just go back a bit and look at what math.round does. Math.round returns a supplied numeric expression rounded to the nearest integer. So it rounds this to the nearest integer. Integer is just a single digit number, or a clean number without any decimals. So it could be 2 digits, 3 digits, but there's no decimals within. So 4.3, if you have a look at this, you'll see it rounds it up to 3. If I do 4.6, it should round it up to 5. Yeah. If I do 45, it should round it up to 46. Yeah. So that's what that does. We comment it out. Move on to the next one. You can do another one called seal, and seal returns the smallest integer greater than or equal to its numeric argument. Numerical argument is what we give it inside here. Let's say 4.3. It will move it up to the ceiling, which will be 5. If you give it 4, it will go to 4. 4.1 should go to 5. 5.5 should go to 6. So it basically just rounds the number that you give it up. If you do floor, it does the opposite. It rounds the number down. So if you do 4.8, for example, it's going to bring it down to 4. If you do 5.2, it's still going to bring it down to 5. So it just rounds the number down to the closest integer. Keep it as that and comment it out. We also have math. Actually, I removed one of them. So I'm going to put seal right here so that you can see it. Next one, math.trunc. What this does is returns the integral part of numeric expression x, removing any fractional digits. If x is already an integer, the result is x. So if I give it 4.6, what will that return? I'm guessing it will return 4, but we're going to have to check. And I need to put this inside of a console.log so that it shows up in the screen, and it returns 4 as I expected. If I put 5.9, it should return 5. That's fine. console.log. The next one is math.pow, which is returns the value of a base expression taken to a specified power. So we can give it, let's say it takes in x and y. So x to the power of y, I think. So let's say if you want to do 4 to the power of 2, we do 4, 2. 4 to the power of 2 should be 16. 2 to the power of 2 should be 4. That's good. Straightforward. Next up, we've got the square root. We've got math.square root, SQRT, returns the square root of a number. So we want the square root of 64. We get 8. We want the square root of 81. We get 9. Very good. Moving on. We want the ABS, which returns the absolute value of a number. The value without regard to whether it's positive or negative. For example, the absolute value of -5 is the same as the absolute value of 5. What this does is basically gets rid of the minus values or the negative in a number. So say we have negative 180. This will return a positive 180, and that's all it does basically. Returns the absolute number. You also have math.min and math.max. Math.min returns the smaller of a set of supplied numeric expressions. So say we have a list of numbers here: 10, 20, 30, 5, 2, 90. What this will do is it will give us the smallest number within that list, which is 2. And the same is true for math.max. Instead, it will give us the maximum value in that list, which is 90. That's quite straightforward. We also have math.random, which will give us a random number between 0 and 1. So we can just run this without any arguments inside here. Every time I refresh, I get a different value between 0 and 1. Now, say we wanted to get a value between 0 and 100, right? We could do something like math.floor, and inside of this we'll do math.random times 101. So firstly, we'll run the inside part. Math.random will give us a value from 0 to 1, and then we're timesing that by 101, and then we're flooring it to get an integer, right? So if we just console.log this and have a look, you'll see that every time you refresh, you get a number between 0 and 100. Yeah. I think we can try to combine something that we learned earlier here. So earlier we tried to create a function, and we tried to create a function where you can double any number. Here we'll try to create a function that will give us a random number. So we'll create a function to get random. We'll do rnd for random integer, or get random number. Actually, they both mean the same thing. And then here we want to give it the minimum and maximum number we want the random number to be within. So if you want a number to be within 50 and 70, we would give it the min here and max here, which would be 50 and 70. Remember, min and max can be anything. You can give them whatever name you want, but for us to understand what this does, we're going to give the min and max. And then inside the function, we're going to return math.floor and math.random times max min plus 1 plus min. And I'm going to explain this to you after we test it. So now if you want to use this function, we do get random number, we want it to be from 20 to 50, for example. And now we can console.log this just to see it. And as you can see, you get a number from 20 to 50 right here. And this is including the number 50. I'm just checking if we can get 50 again. Doesn't look like we will, but it is inclusive of 50 and 20. And what this does is basically it goes through maths.random, which gives you a number from 0 to 1, and then it times it by 50 minus 20, or maximum minus min, plus 1. And then to include the maximum and the min, it does a plus min. And then all of that is wrapped inside the dot floor to get you the integer. Again, this might seem a bit too complex, but I just wanted to use this as an example. And you can refer to this function later on again if you wanted to create a random number. And I'm sure we will use this in the future together in this course. But for now, I'm going to comment it out and continue on. Another thing I wanted to touch on quickly is the comparison. So to be able to compare different values, like we've done earlier with the equal to an equal, 3 equals and 2 equals. Let's do we have anything defined here? These should be fine. Let's do let x equals to 10. And then we want to do let y equals to 20. Now we do console.log, and we check is x less than y, which is a comparison, which is true. X is smaller than y. What about x greater than y? That is false. So these are comparisons that you can run. We can also do the equal sign like we've done before, and equal, equal, equal. These are all different comparisons. And I'm going to move on to the if-else statement. And this is usually used in conjunction with comparisons. So to give you a very quick example, we'll actually use these values that we have here, uncomment them. Now we'll create an if statement if x is smaller than y, which you add in a parentheses like this, and then curly brackets. Now everything that is in this code will be for true. So if this results to true, it will run this part, else it will run this part. So as you can see here, we've created an if statement, and within parentheses we added the condition, and this condition will add the amount to true or false. If it's true, it will run this part of the code, the first part, and if it's false, it will run the second part, the else part. So let's just try this out. Let's do console.log true and console.log false. And you can expect this to be true because x is smaller than y, and there you go, it outputs this text and it doesn't ever run this code. Now that is a simple use of if else. You could also use if x is smaller than y, else if another condition, y is greater than x, for example, and you can nest as many, you can write as many else if statements as you want here. And what it will do is it will check if this is true, it will run this code. If it's not, it will check if this is true, and if it is, it will run this code inside here. And if it's not, it will check if this inside here is true, which we'll set to this, for example. And if this is true, it will run this. And then if none of these are true, then nothing will run. But if you want something to run all the time, you can end it with an else. Now, if this is true, I will run. If If it's not, it will go here and it will check. If this condition is true, I will run. And again, if it's not true, it will run to this section. It will check if this is true. If it is, this will run. And if this is false and this is false and this is false, it's going to check if it has an else statement. If it does, it will run this code right here. Okay, so hopefully that's quite straightforward. Starting from the top to the bottom, checks if the condition is true. If it does, if it is true, it runs the bracket next to it, or the code within that bracket next to it. Otherwise, it goes on to the next else if and continues until it finds an else or a true statement and runs that code. So that is an if statement. And how you would use this in a real life example would be something like, say we have a variable called logged in, which is where we store if the user is logged in or not. If it's logged in, we have it as true. If it's not logged in, we have it as false. Now we check if the user is logged in. Let's change this to user is logged in. Okay. So now we check if user is logged in. We want to output user is logged in. Else, because it's not true, user is not logged in. Okay. So now as you can see, if we refresh this, what do you expect to see in the console? You'll see the second one, because the first one will run, but it won't be true. So it will run to the else, and that will output user is not logged in. I'm going to remove this console.log up here. There we go. If I was to change this to true, of course, user is logged in now. Again, change it to false, user is not logged in. So that's the use of if statements. You will basically have some if statements in your program to check for certain things. For example, in your room, for example, you have a light switch. That light switch checks if the light is switched on. If it's switched on, the light comes on. If it's switched off, the light goes off. Just a very simple example. Something similar to if statements is a switch statement. So let me just add right here if statements, and down here we have switch statements, and these are very similar to one another, but the way they're written is different. So for a switch statement, we have the keyword switch, and we have parentheses. Inside the parentheses, we'll write the variable. Let's say we have a variable of x, and it equals to 10. So a switch, which is the keyword, will take in a parameter of the variable that we're trying to match, and then we add curly brackets, and within here we'll add different switches or different cases, just like we did in the if statement. We had different else if. Here we'll have different cases, so we'll put case, and here we'll add, let's say 20. So what this will check is if x right here is equal to 20, then this code would run. X is equal to 20, right? And then we have to break that code right here. And then we need another case, which is the same or the equivalent of else if, which will run if the first one is not true. Let's do 30. X is equal to 30. And one more, we'll do x is equal to 40 right here. And then just like the else if statement, at the end we have an else. If nothing else runs or nothing else is true, here we have a default that will run if nothing else is true. And here we'll say nothing else is true, so we ran. Okay. Now again, just to recap, we've got a switch keyword, and that takes in the value. Oops, that takes in the variable that we want to check. And here we're checking basically if x equals to 20, which is the case, the first case. Second case, we want to check if x is equal to 30. Third case, we want to check if x is equal to 40. If any of these are true, it will run the code here. And the reason we have break is if the case is true, then the code will run, and then it will run the next one until it finds a break. That's why we want to have the break there, so that if it runs this code and it's true, it will output this code, or it will run this code, and then it will find a break and it will stop. So for every case, we have certain actions that we want to perform, and so we want to stop the code from running after we've performed these actions. So here we check if x is 20 for the first case, which is not true, so we move on to the next one. Is x equal to 30 in this case? It's not, so we move on to the next one. Is x equal to 40 in this case? It's not, so we move on to the last one, which is default. So nothing else is true, so we ran. Let's check. Nothing else is true, so we ran. That's fine. What we want to do is change the value of x here to 20 and check. You'll see that x is equal to 20. This ran and it's equal to 20, so the code runs. If I remove the break, just to show you what I mean, you'll see that it moves on to the second one and it outputs x is equal to 30, even though x is never equal to 30, but because there's no break, the next case runs. So once again, just make sure that you add a break at the end of each case so that only that code runs and it doesn't fall down to the next case unexpectedly. What else do we have? There was one thing that I wanted to add in terms of the conditions or the comparisons that we went through previously. So if I just comment all of this out, and previously we had a look at the comparisons of greater than, smaller than, or less than, greater than, and equal to, 3 equals and 2 equals. We also have some other ones, like let's just put 10 here, x equals to 10 and y equals to 5. You also have the greater than or equal to and the less than or equal to. So if I do y is greater than or equal to x, what do you think the output will be here? Y is 5 and x is 10, and we're saying y is greater than or equal to x. Of course, the value should be false. And if we do less than or equal to, it will be true because y is 5, which is less than or equal to 10. So if I do y is equal to 10, this basically says y is equal to, y is smaller than or equal to 10. Or y is smaller than or equal to x, and y and x equal to 10. So this will be true as well, because it's not less than, but it is equal to. So if I remove this equal sign, you should get false, because y is not less than x, but it is less than or equal to x. So hopefully that's clear. These are the two that I missed earlier. There is one more as well, where you can have a exclamation mark equal to, which is basically the equivalent of not equal to. So this will check whether y is not equal to x, and that will be false because y is equal to x. And you can also do the same thing with two equal signs, and that will check for the type and the value, like we said earlier. And this will check only for value. This exclamation mark can be used in different instances as well. So if you had like an if statement, like previously we had the if statements and we would write the condition within the parentheses, you can write a condition here, for example, x is greater than, say, 5. Okay, and then we wanted to add the exclamation mark. We would just wrap this in a parentheses, and outside of that we'll do exclamation mark. So what this will do is basically check the condition right here, give it a value. So if x is greater than 5, which it is, this will be true, and then the exclamation mark will basically be the inverse. It will be the inverse of true. So the inverse of true, or the opposite of true, is false. So instead of this being true, this whole thing would mount to false. So this is basically just giving you the opposite of the value that you have, the inverse. Now with that said, I think we have a few more things to look at. 1 second. We've covered if else statements, we've covered switch statements, and I think we now need to cover the loops, which is a important concept in programming in general. So if you pick this up, for example, now in JS, you will definitely see this in PHP. We will definitely come across it in PHP. Just like the if statement in the switch. A loop is basically code to loop through the properties of an array or string or an object. So it's basically iterating through a specific variable multiple times and allowing the code to run multiple times. So I'll give you a quick example. If you have for, which is the keyword, and then parentheses, the first thing you add here is the variable that you want to set. So we'll set an x equals to 0. And then the second part of this will be the condition that the loop will run by. So as long as this condition is true, the loop will keep running. As soon as this condition is false, the loop stops running. So the condition we want here is x smaller than 10. So as long as this condition is smaller than 10, or as long as x is smaller than 10, this condition will mount to true. And we're starting off with x equal to 0, as you can see. And then the condition will be 0 smaller than 10. If it's true, it will run, and so on. The last part, which is the third part, inside the parentheses, and here we basically give it the increment value, and this will increment our x for every iteration. What that means is that for every step in the loop, the x will be increased by 1. So for the first time this runs, and I'm going to run this and then try to explain it to you. So let's put console.log and we put x in here, for example. And we will just have a look at what we get here. Let's see that we don't have, let's make sure we don't have any console.logs except this one. We look at this, you'll see that you've outputted from 0 to 9. And the reason this runs 10 times from 0 to 9 is because we started off with 0. And then we added the condition of x is smaller than 10. So as long as x is smaller than 10, this condition will run. So for the first iteration, x is 0. So this condition mounts to true. That means this code will run. The first time it will run, x will be 0 right here. And then after this code runs and it finishes this block of code, it will increment x by 1. So now x goes back to the start and it's been incremented by 1. So the value of x now is 1. Going into the condition, 1 smaller than 10 or x smaller than 10, still true. So then this code runs. And that's when you see x as being 1. And then it goes back to the top. It checks, it adds 1 to x first of all. And then it checks, is x smaller than 10? Now x is 2, and 2 is smaller than 10. So this turns to be true. It runs the code here, and then it adds 1 to x. Now x is 3. X goes back here. Is it smaller than 10? Yes, it is. I run this code, and then add 1 to x. X is 4 now. Is 4 smaller than 10? Yes, it is. Run this code, add 1 to x, x is 5, 5 is smaller than 10, run the code, plus 6, 7, 8, 9. And then when it gets to 9 and it runs this code, as you can see here, we've written 9, or it's outputted 9 with the console.log, finishes running the code, goes back, adds 1 to x, becomes 10. Is 10 smaller than 10? No, it's not. That's the end of the loop. So it runs 10 times, starting from 0 to 10, or 0 to 9, sorry. If you wanted 10 to be outputted, you can do equals to 10. So now, if x is smaller than or equal to 10, it will output this. So if we had 9 and we ran this code, we went back, added 1 to 9, becomes 10. Is 10 smaller than or equal to 10? It is. So if you refresh this, have a look, you'll see that it's outputted 10 as well, just because of this equal sign. Now, this is the steps we want to go through the iterations. Now, what we can do as well is change the step right here. Instead of adding 1 each time in the iteration, we want to add 2. So remember we said we do plus equals to 2 is the same as doing x equals to x plus 2. So we do that right here. We want to add 2 to x each time. So if we check this, you'll see that each time in the loop it adds 2 instead of 1 this time. So it goes from 0 plus 2, 2 plus 2, 4 plus 2, 6 plus 2, 8 plus 2, 10, but 10 is not smaller than 10, so this doesn't run. So this is basically the idea of looping through using a for loop. Now, just to show you a quick example, if we have cars like we did previously, actually, do you know what? Yes, let's just rewrite it, it's fine. Cars, and then we have BMW. Now it's telling me I've already set it above, so I'm going to remove let. And actually I'm going to see, yes, we still have it up there, so we might as well just use it. If you don't have it set, just make sure you set cars to any array, put some values in BMW, etc, etc. I already have it set up there, right here, as you can see, so I'm not going to redo it. And then I'm gonna, this time, put this back to plus plus, and for x, we want to do x equals to 0, and then the condition will be x is smaller than cars.length. So this will mean that this x is smaller than the length of the array that we have. And then in here, we want to output each item of the array. So usually we do cars and then brackets and the index that we want to output. Here the index will be x, because that will keep changing. The first time the index will be 0, the second time the index will be 1, third time the index will be 2, and so on. So if we just have a look at this right here, you should see that we get all the values within that cars array. BMW, Toyota, Aston, Mazda, Mercedes, 10, 5, 4, true, false. And this is how you would loop through an array, basically, using this index that has been provided here, which keeps getting incremented with each iteration. Now this is one type of loop. The other type of loop is for key in object. So we'll create this object and we'll name it, for example, or we'll give it a name key of, let's do the person one that we did previously, which might still be there. I believe it is at the top. If we just check right here, you'll see person is still available right there, so we can use that. We haven't commented out. If you have commented out, just bring it back in. Person, and then key right here, and we'll do console.log key inside. And this will give us all the keys inside that person. So inside the person up here, we have name, age, occupation, has driving license. If you go back down, name, age, occupation, has driver license, and the way you would access the value is just basically put person and then key in brackets, and that will give us the actual values. So we could do something like key and then comma, and then person key. That will give us a name, John, age 18, occupation unemployed, has driver license, false. So this is to loop through an object. It's similar to the for loop, but here instead of the index we get the actual keys within the object. The other one is let's say w here, let w of, and then we put cars, and we get console.log w. So again, we're using the array cars that we've set up here, and we're trying to use this for loop with of, for of instead of for in. We're using for of. I'm gonna comment this out and check this, and as you can see, this gives you the item directly. So this is similar to the for loop, but instead of it giving you the index in X, it gives you the value of the array, or the item in the array. So we have cars. Within cars we have BMW, Toyota, Aston, and each time it goes through the loop it sets W, or whatever name you give it here, as the item. So the first time it runs through the loop, W is BMW, the second time is Toyota, etc. And as you can see here, we're just constantly logging each time. So these are the three different types of loops that you can use: the for loop, the for in, and the for of. And you can use each one just depending on the scenario that's in front of you. One more loop is the while loop. So while is the keyword, and then in parentheses we have the condition. So while x is greater than 10, for example, we want to run specific code, and that code will be within these brackets. What do we want to do? We want to console.log x. So we're going to start with x being 0, and maybe change this to minus 10, or less than 10, sorry. And now within this we need to increment x each time. So what will happen here is we will run x as 0, and then it will check if x is less than 10, which it is when it starts. It will run this code. First it will console.log x, and then secondly it will add 1 to x. So x being 0 will become 1, and then it will go back to the top, check if 1 is smaller than 10. Yes it is. Run the code, add 1. 2 is smaller than 10. Yes it is. Run the code and add 1. Now it's 3 minus 3 is smaller than 10. Yeah, run the code, carry on until it gets to 10. And is 10 smaller than 10? No, it's not. Then it's going to stop running. If we just check this out, we get the same thing that we got earlier for the for loop, but using a while loop. The only difference here is that we've had to define this outside the loop and this inside the loop, whereas for the for loop you define all of them on the same line. And that's really the difference between the two. There are some scenarios where you'll find that while is more suitable than a for loop, but I'm just getting you exposed to all of these different methods, and when you move to different languages as well, you'll see a lot of these are being repeated again or being used. So these are concepts, fundamental concepts of programming that you're learning. So it's good to just try and understand the concept and not trying to memorize them. Just understand what a for loop does, how it works, and how it's used in a while loop, if statement, switch, etc. Now, believe it or not, we're getting closer to the end. We still have a few things to cover though, starting with the try and catch. For this try and catch, I'm actually going to get an example from the W Schools website. I'm going to type in try and catch instead. The only reason I'm using this is because they have some good examples I'd like to show you. For example, here it tells you that the try statement allows you to define a block of code to be tested for errors while it's being executed. The catch statement allows you to define a block of code to be executed if an error occurs in the try block. Essentially what that means is that you have a block of code within the try brackets, and it's going to try and run that. If it sees any errors, it's going to run this block of code. So what it's doing is that it's trying to catch any errors, if there is any, and it's going to run this code if it does catch any errors, basically. So the way it's written is just using the keyword try with curly brackets, and after that you'll add the catch, parentheses, error, curly brackets, and that's pretty much it. And the error would usually throw some sort of object to tell you more about the error, but here you would just write some sort of code, any sort of code, and if there was an error with this code, then it would basically execute this. This runs if there is any errors above in the try block. This runs and checks for any errors. If found errors, runs catch block. So hopefully that's straightforward. We will use this in the future again, but for now just wanted to try and run through and explain try and catch briefly. You also have the throw statement. So within the error you can throw these throw statements, which basically throws an error, and you can add some text to it or a number. Throw a text, throw a number, just to give some feedback with regards to the type of error that's just happened. So I'm just going to label this as try and catch, comment it all out, and we move on to the next part. Now the next part is a bit more interesting. It's to do with the scopes that are covered in JavaScript. The three scopes that are covered are block scopes, or the block scope, the function scope, and the global scope. So we'll try to go through these one by one. Now the block scope is basically say anything within these brackets. These are the block, this is the block scope. So if we have a let x equals to 2 right here, and we try to use x outside, so if we do console.log x, actually we might have used x previously, I'm not too sure, let's just try it. Console.x, and we check right here, it says x is not defined, even though x is right here, but outside of this block you can't use x. Whereas if you used var, you would be able to see what x is. So outside of here you can access x if it's a variable, a var, but if it's a let, you can't access it outside of the block. So what let does, it gives it a block scope, and var gives it a global scope. So these are the differences between the two, block and global scope. Block is any curly brackets, that's the block scope, and the global scope is outside right here. And then the function scope is, let's say you have a function called xyz, and you set let x equal to 3, for example. Now if we comment this out and try to see what x is, you'll get that x is not defined, because this is defined within the function scope. Even if we put a var, it will still not be defined, because this is anything inside the function brackets is the function scope. So that's the three different types of scopes that we have: the function scope, the global scope outside, and the block scope. Hopefully that's clear. If it's not, again, we will be covering a lot of this stuff when we start writing our web page. So don't worry about that, but just try to understand the concepts, even if you have to rewind and just try to listen to it again. Now the next part is this keyword. And to explain this, I'm gonna have to actually pull the person that we created up here, copy it. Actually, I'm gonna comment this out now. Go to the bottom, paste it, change this to const, although it should be the same really. And I'm gonna add a full name right here. And before that, I'm gonna add a last name up here and do do. and change the name to first name. So now down here, when we have the full name, we can add a function which will return, like we said, a function always returns something, or it can return nothing. We're going to return the first name and the last name together. So the way you would access this is using this dot first name. So this will access this scope, this object scope that we're currently in, and it will give you access to these things. So we're accessing this object, and remember, to access a key in the object you do dot and then the key name, and then we do plus space plus this dot last name. And the reason we do this plus is to concatenate strings. So to put a string with another string, or to attach a string with another string, you would do plus. Now if we just have a look at person and try to see what that looks like, you'll see that we've got age, first name, full name is a function. So if we try to run full name, we'll do full name run, and it should give us the full name right here. So what it's doing is it's using this to access this object and give us the values of first name and last name. So this is what this is for. This is basically a keyword that gives you access to your current scope. So if I'm outside here and I want to access the scope out here, I can do this, and this will give me the global scope, right? So we've done function scope, global scope, and the third one, which was block scope. This right here is the global scope, where you have things like alert, which we've covered previously, as you can see, and inner height, inner width gives you information about the document itself. But basically this is the global scope that you're looking at right here. Inside here you have the object scope, the block scope, depending on where this is sitting. So this is referring to the block scope right here. But if you have it in a function outside, for example, like we did around here, if you access this, usually you get the function scope. So that's it for this. And we will also use this when we start delving deeper into JavaScript. So don't you worry. For example, right now, actually, let's do that. There's something we call classes in JavaScript, which is basically a blueprint for a specific code that you're going to reuse over and over again across the app. So let's say we have a person, right? We have a class person, and this class name could be anything, but you try to keep it as relevant as possible. For this case, we have a class person, and inside of here, the class usually has a constructor function that runs when the class is created. And inside this, we will have different attributes. And this will take different arguments. So we will have the name of the person, the age of the person, the occupation, and also has driving license. Again, I'm not sure how you spell this. Let me just stick with the other spelling. And that's it. So these are the arguments that we're gonna create each time we create a person, or these are the arguments that we'll pass in each time we create a person. So now we want to attach these arguments as attributes to the class, and the way you do that is using this keyword that we've just looked at, and this gives us access to this block scope right here, this class. So this dot name will equal to name right here. This dot age, so these are attributes that we're defining right now. So every person will have a name, every person will have an age, and these are things that you can customize, but the value will have to be the same as the ones that are being passed in. So we'll just set this to age. This dot occupation equals to occupation, and then let's just put driving license equals to this one right here. So as you can see, this is not the same as this because this is an attribute we're creating inside of this class, and this attribute has a value of this that's being passed in. Now to show you what this actually looks like, before we put it to use, we're gonna create, actually this is fine, let's just put it to use so that it's less confusing for you. Now we've created a class person, and we can use this all over the code. We don't have to rewrite this. Every time we use the class person, we have access to all of these attributes. And the way you can reuse this is, let's say we create P1 as person 1. We'll do new person, which will create a new object with the class person right here, and then do parentheses. And as you can see, this takes the name, age, occupation, and has driver license, right? So we'll give it a name, John Doe again, and age we'll say 91 this time, occupation retired, and has driver license true, right? And we'll do P2, we'll create a second person, and now you're starting to see how we're using the same code over and over again. We've created a variable and we've attached the value of the person class here. We're attaching another value for P2 as the person class with values. Let's use my name this time. And then the age is 20. I'm not 20, but occupation is programmer. I am a programmer. As driver license, let's just say false, not no. Now if we console.log this P1 and P2, and let's just have a look at what we get. As you can see, we've got two different persons. We've got person at the top. If you show this up, you'll see age, everything that we've created has been set. So similar to what we've done here in the object, but this time we've used a class, and this class can be reused across the application. And the second person is Mohammed, age 20, driver license false, name Mohammed, occupation programmer. And you can literally reuse this person over and over again. For example, if you had another class of doctor, let's say, this time we have a doctor, and we want to use the same things that we have previously used right here, the same attributes. Basically, we want the doctor to have the same attributes as a person. We will do extends person, and now this doctor will inherit all of these attributes automatically. So we'll do a constructor, and this time we will try to do, a doctor will usually have, let's say, salary and experience, for example, and this dot salary equals salary, this dot experience equal experience. Whoops, experience. Now if we created a third person and we gave him, instead of creating a person, we create a doctor this time, and inside of this we give the doctor the salary of say 40,000 and experience of 5 years. Let's see what comes up with this. So we're going to remove P1 and P2 and check P3. Let's have a look. As you can see, must call super constructor and derived class before accessing this or returning them from derived constructor. So what you need to do here is basically call super, and as you can see, calling super will call this function. And right here we've created a doctor class, but we've extended the person. So we have a person, the age is unknown, driving license is unknown, name is unknown, occupation is unknown, but we have experience and salary set. So usually you would have these values given in as well. So with the doctor, for example, we'll add the name, age. Name will be doc1, age will be 50, and what else do we need to give in? Occupation, we've already mentioned that's a doctor, so maybe we can hard code that in. What else do we need? Driving license, set that to true. So now what we have in here is basically the name and the age, and doctor will be hard coded, so you don't need to add that actually. Just the driver license. I believe you can add this into here. So name, age, and this will basically pass it in to the parent, which is the person. So we're passing in name, passing in age, passing in occupation, which is doctor, and we want to pass in the driver license from here. So now if you check this out, you'll see that we have a doctor. Even though we've created the class doctor, we're extending the person class right here, and we're using all of these values, all of these attributes, including these two new attributes that are only specific for a doctor. So if I just add P1 and P2 here, and we'll have a look at all three, you'll see the difference between a person and a doctor is that a doctor has a salary and experience, whereas a person doesn't have salary or experience. Hopefully that makes some sense. There's quite a lot to go through, but again, we will cover a lot of this in detail, but I wanted you to understand what a class is. It's a blueprint for a block of code that is being reused over the app, and this is how it looks pretty much in action. So for now, I'm going to comment this out, and we're going to move on to the second last part of this, I guess. And for this one, we're going to have to create a few files actually. But before I do that, I'm going to go through this export keyword, which basically allows you to export a functionality from a file to another file. So say for example you have a function here, and we call it, for example, XYZ, and we want to use this function in another file, in another JS file. We don't want to use it in this file. So the way you would do that is you would do export. So let's say we do export function XYZ. The way you would call this in another file would be to, first of all, let's add something in the XYZ. We'll do XYZ, console.log XYZ. Now we're exporting the function. Let's create a new file called imports.js. Within this import, we want to import this function right here. So how would we do that? We would use the import keyword, and inside import we'll do brackets, curly brackets, and then the name of the function or the name of the variable, which is XYZ in this case, and then from, where are we importing it from, / is for your current directory, and then the name of the file. And this should give us access to the function within this file, right? The other way you would do this as well is, instead of doing export function XYZ, say you have a variable this time that you wanted to output. So we have a variable called const name John Doe, and you want to use this variable in another folder or another file, sorry. You would do export const name again, and in here you would do, instead of NYZ, you would do name, and that will give you access to this right here, and you can start using name just like you would in the index.js file. But if we wanted to, let's say, give or export more variables, let's say we have age as well, we want to export that, but instead of having to write export on each one, what you could do is simply remove these, and then at the bottom you could do export object, and then inside of here you'll write all the variables that you'd like to export. So now we've exported name and age from this file, and over here we can import name and age just like that. Hopefully that makes sense. So this is just to share code between different files. You export from one file and import from another file. Now the other way to do this is to, if you're only exporting a single thing from a file, let's say we only want to export the name, we could do export default name and close all of this, or comment all of this off. So export default name, and then save that, and then on the other side we would use name again, but we'd remove these brackets. So we'd do import name without the brackets. So that's what you do when you export a default. And you can also write this default at the bottom of the page. So you could do export default name, and that will export this value or this variable to the other page. And the only difference again here is that you're not using the brackets, you're only using the name directly, and over here you're adding the default, and this is usually used when you're exporting only a single thing from the page. Again, if you want to export multiple things, you would do export at the bottom and add the variables like this. But if you're exporting only a single thing, you can use a default and import it like this without brackets. If you're importing multiple things and you're not importing a default variable, you would import it with brackets. If it's a default, if it's an export default, then you import it without the brackets. So let's just write that as a comment. To import an export default, you don't need brackets around the variable. Let's just take this comment right here, i.e. this for example, and to import an export, you use the following. Similar to this, but with brackets around it. So hopefully that's clear. And just to make it even more clear, I'm going to add it all on this page. We've got a const name. We want to export that. We want to export age as well. Const age, which is 20. And now we want to import it. Assuming we want to import it in this page, it will be something like name, age, from path here. So this will be the path name. So this is how you export it, and this is how you import it. And this would be individual export, and this would be grouped export if you wanted to group them together directly. It's the same thing, but it's just this is separated and this is grouped. But for importing, it's still the same. And the other way is to use an export default, which we've already covered, and that would be export default when you're exporting a single thing from a file. So let's say we're exporting name, which is John Doe again. The way you would import this is without the brackets. You would just import from and then path name. So hopefully you see the difference. Here we're using default without brackets. Here we're using no default but with brackets for the import, and that's basically the difference there. And with that, I think we have reached the final part of this video, and that is to go through JSON or to explain what JSON is. And JSON is basically a type of file where data is stored, and it's a way of storing data in a key value pair, which we've already covered using the object in JavaScript. So it's very similar to an object. The only difference is that in a JSON we use the key and value again, but we have quotes around the key and the value. So we have, for example, name, put it around quotes, comma, and then John Doe, age 20, occupation 40, occupation 40, okay, that's a sign that I need to go. Programmer in brackets, or quote, sorry, and then that should be it. That's enough. Now, as you can see, we'll change this to person again, and we'll just console.log this very quickly. We'll comment everything up here so we don't have issues, and we'll see what this looks like. And as you can see, it looks like a normal JavaScript object, but in reality this is how the JSON is set up. And JSON is basically spelled this way. JSON is, let's see the proper definition for JSON. JSON is an open standard file format. So it's a file format and data interchange format that uses human readable text to store and transmit data objects consisting of attribute values, value pairs, and arrays. It's a common data format with diverse uses in electronic data interchange, including that of web applications with servers. So basically what that means is that it's a file format. So you will have a file, for example, file.json, and that will be the extension. And within that file you will have basically an object, and within that object you'll have key pair values. And these key pair values will look something like this, where the key is wrapped within quotes and the value is wrapped within quotes, unless the value is a number. Whereas with an object, a JavaScript object, we had, if you go all the way to the top and uncomment this, you see the difference between this and down there. It was that, actually let's just copy and paste it to down there again so that we can see it up close, and just name this to W. You'll see that the difference here is that name is not wrapped within quotes, whereas in a JSON format it is. Here is just a straight string or a variable name, and here it's wrapped as if it's a string. So that's the difference between JSON and the JavaScript object. They're very similar, but this is a slight difference. So you need to make sure when you're writing a JSON output, you have everything within quotes except numbers. Everything on the left side needs to be within quotes, and everything on the right side needs to be within quotes unless it's a number. We will be using a lot of JSON in the future, but I just wanted to give you a little introduction as to what JSON is, and it is quite straightforward. So there's actually 2 or 3 different things that I have forgotten to mention, which I'd like to cover very quickly before ending this video. And they are to do with, number 1, the string methods that we mentioned above. There's one of the string methods that I commonly use, and it's called .split. So let's say we have a string of str equals to, we're going to use hello world as an example again. And now we want to use str.split. What this does is, if we put this in a console.log just to see what it does, and give it an argument of just quotes, double quotes, and have a look at this, you'll see that it's turned this string into an array, and it's split every character into an index. So index 0 is H, index 1 is E, etc. And the opposite of that is also .join. So you can turn an array into a string by doing .join. So if I do .join right here, it's going to turn this array back into a string. So .split is used for strings, to turn a string into an array. Let me just write that down. .split turns a string into an array with a separator as an argument. So what this means is that, say if in our string we had, between every letter we had a hyphen, for example, right? Now we wanted to separate this string into an array based on every hyphen. The argument right here, we'd give it a hyphen. Instead of it just keeping it empty, which will separate every character, we give it a hyphen, and now every time it sees a hyphen, it will create a new item in the array. As you can see here, we get the same thing again. There's a problem here with the hello world. I might have missed a hyphen. Yes, in this space I haven't added a hyphen. So as you can see, it's grouped them together because there was no hyphen. But if I add a hyphen right before W, that should fix that. And now we have every letter within an item in the array. So that's .split, and .join, just like I mentioned again, we'll create a new variable just to make sure everything is clear. Let r equals the array. We've created r before, so we do r2. And now I'm going to give it just different names really. John, Michael, Johnson. And now comment this out, create a new console.log so that within it we want to see array2 .join. And if we just check this out, we'll see that it joins the array separated by a comma. So here we can choose what we'd like to join it by. So if you want it to join it by a hyphen, you can do that and it will join it by a hyphen. You want it to join it by 6 dots, you can do that as well. So these are two of the common methods that I used in JavaScript, split and join. At least in my case, I tend to use them quite a lot because I have to switch between a string to an array back and forth. So I just thought that would be useful to share. And then the last thing was combining different or multiple comparisons. So we've covered how to, let's say we have an x equals to 100 and a y equals to 50, and we have a c equals to 6, just random numbers, and then we have a o equal to, in here we want to have some sort of comparison, right? Now usually what we've covered is x smaller than let's say y, and this is one comparison. If you wanted to combine another comparison, we can do and. This basically stands for and then we can add another one where we could do y minus, not minus, less than x, for example. Now we could console.log this and check what O is. You see O is false, but basically what this does is it checks if this is true and this is true, then it returns true. But if this is true or false and this is true or false, basically if one of these is false, then you will get a false, but if both of them are true, then you will get a true. And the same is true for this one as well. So this means or, let me just write a comment here, equals to and equals to or. So here, if this is true or this is true, you will get a true. Whereas with the other one, both of them have to be true for you to get a true here. So hopefully that makes sense. Just thought I would cover that. And remember, you can use these comparisons in if statements. So again, I'll use the same comparison here. X smaller than or less than y, and y minus or less than x, sorry, and then add an else block. And now here both of these have to be true for this block to run, otherwise this will run. And if we change this to all, only one of these sides need to be true for this block to run. Hopefully you've benefited from this video. I have covered quite a bit, to be honest. I've tried to get through it as quick as I can, but don't worry if some of it doesn't make sense to you. It will once we put it all together. Just try to understand the concepts that we've covered, like variables, functions, classes, objects, etc., the different data types, strings, numbers, booleans, arrays, all of that. And we will put it all together. We will tie all the pieces together and it will make perfect sense to you. So don't worry, just make sure you, again, I feel like a broken record here, but just try to take in the concepts, try to observe these concepts and understand them. And I'll see you in the next video where we'll be covering PHP. If you have any questions, make sure you leave them down in the comments below. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you in the next one.